story in two parts. Part one, Steve's story. 26 miles across the sea, Santa Catalina is a-waiting for me. Santa Catalina, the island of romance. Romance, romance, romance. Water all around it, everywhere. Tropical seas and the salty air. But for me, the thing that's a-waiting there's romance. Or at least I hope so. Catalina Island is indeed 26 miles across the sea, across the ocean from Port Angeles in Southern California to the island. And the island has miles of beaches and girls and quality restaurants and hotels and girls and a world-class casino and girls and places for the wealthy and for everybody else. And so a couple of buddies and I, we were 18 years old, we got on that ferry with wishful thinking in mind and hope for the very best. Hope to have fun and games and perhaps romance. There's a lot of things I expected in Catalina, but the thing I did not expect was Judy Whistler. I had a massive crush on Judy when we were 14. When we were 14, she lived down the block from me, a long block, Angeles Vista Boulevard. And I used to take every chance I could get to walk my dog down the block to the front of her house and walk by it. I was like Freddie Einsford Hill in My Fair Lady. I have often walked down the street before, but the pavement always stayed beneath my feet before. All at once am I several stories high, knowing I was on the street where she lived. And she was often out front with her basketball, dribbling. And one day, she invited me into her house and into her room. I say this laughing because I was 14. I had no idea. There was no romance or really an awareness of the possibilities of that situation. And so now, that's not true. I'm 18. I'm pumped. I'm hormone driven. I'm ready. I get an invitation to her house. She is there they have a cottage that her parents had rented. So I was invited to the cottage, and when I got to the cottage, had her on the gauntlet. Her parents were sitting on the front steps. So there are all kinds of questions. And so finally, I got through them to the house, to Judy, and to her bedroom. And the first thing I see in the trash is a bloody tampon. I'm embarrassed. I freaked. I absolutely freaked out. I just stopped talking. And after a few minutes, I made an excuse and left. The parents must have been shocked that I had such a short visit. I got back to the room we rented and just realized how badly I had made the situation. The fantasies of romance and sex, gone. What had I done? So I went and bought my first and last pack of cigarettes to deal with my grief. And I learned that night the lifelong lesson that smoking is disgusting. And it was my first and last cigarette. And anyway, so I realized that was the end of that, and I never expected to see Judy again. 10 years passed. I was a programmer analyst for a company in Redondo Beach that did software for credit cards. And I was senior programmer on a project that the guys were coming in to talk about. So I was invited to the CEO's office, and guess who the secretary is? Judy. So I gotta admit that she was kind of 10 years past. She was kind of matronly. She wasn't the cute teenager I remembered at all. And so we said our nice hellos, and then it was gone. And I realized that we all have our teenage fantasies. And some of them Many of them we get past, and I got past this one that way. Second part of the story. Judy's story. Now, I know you're laughing because you think Judy's a brunette, not a blonde. So, I get that. Judy's story. 18 years old, just graduated from high school. My parents said I could choose our vacation that year within reason. So the first thing out of my mouth was Hawaii. Any of the Hawaiian Islands would be great. And they said, that's not what our definition of within reason. So I said, how about Catalina? They said, we can rent a cottage there for a couple weeks. That's a great idea. Little did they know that Catalina was my first choice. I know, a bit manipulative, but it was the best way I knew to get what I wanted. So it worked. And so we got to Catalina, and we got checked into our cottage, and I went out walking with our dog, and who did I see but Steve? And I mean, I had this big crush on Steve when we were 14, and I didn't expect to see him because he moved. The year after he started walking by my house, he moved. Oh, walking by my house. So he used to walk by my house, walking his dog regularly. And what I knew and what he never figured out was I was on the lookout for him, because I knew he walked by my house and then he turned around 5 minutes later and came back, and in that 5 minutes I got outside and took my basketball and started tossing it in the hoops. And he stopped, played horse sometimes, and that was what happened. Then he disappeared. He was gone for 3 years, and I see him, and he runs up to me. He is really excited to see me, and I'm delighted to see him, and I invite him to come to my home, or he invited himself, doesn't matter. Anyway, he came to my home, he got into my house, and he came into my bedroom, and then there's this Steve that I didn't even know. I mean, it'd been 3 years, but I thought he would talk, he would say something. He just stood there, and they made excuses, and they left. I was bewildered. And then I saw the bloody tampon and figured out, that freaked him out. But I wasn't done. I was going to find Steve. We have no way of finding each other, but I went out walking, and the older brother in the TV show Leave It to Beaver was on the beach, surrounded by his adoring crowds, but no Steve. Couldn't find him anywhere. Walked for miles. So I figured that was the end of that fantasy, and that was the last time I would see him, and then 10 years passed. I'm the executive secretary, the CEO of a software company in Redondo Beach, and there's a meeting that Steve is supposed to be invited to. But Steve has got this big beard and big afro hair, really casual clothes. This is an important client. The CEO does not want to invite him to the meeting. But he has no choice, he realizes. So I'm a senior guy on the project. So the guys from Toronto show up, and they're technology persons, even more hippie-ish than Steve. And he got long red curly hairs, long 4 or 5 inch beard, really casual clothes. Anyway, the meeting was a success. And frankly, so much of Steve's face was taken up by his hair, I wouldn't have even have recognized him. Except I knew he was coming. And he apparently recognized me, and we talked and chatted a little bit, and then he was gone. Turns out this crush started when I was 14, and finally, as all things do, ended 15 years later.
So did you